All right, here we go with professional sport. Finally, we've reached what a lot of you have been waiting for. The dream job for many students in sport management is obviously that professional sport entity. It's something that we all grow up. We grow up watching our favorite sport teams, and the idea of being able to work for them and that sort of exciting atmosphere, the idea of potentially being involved in a ticker tape parade when you work for the Giants or you work for any professional team who wins a major professional sporting event championship is something that is special, and make no mistake, it can be very exciting and rewarding to be a part of something that special. There's no there might not be any better feeling associated with work and sport and that sort of thing. Having been a former employee of the Carolina Hurricanes, when we won the Stanley Cup, I felt like it made it that much more special for me. So moving along, the learning outcomes, as you can see, are career-based to ultimately help you know of all the options and land a job in the field. But we must establish a firm base first in talking about professional sports. So we'll move through that. We'll look briefly at the unique aspects of professional sport management, as these are important for you in forming a solid base and understanding also the core competencies that are involved. So when we think about the key component that denotes professionalism in some form is some form of compensation, and that can be in the form of a salary, bonuses, reimbursement for expenses, or any other forms of direct payment. That's the key component that denotes professionalism. Obviously, we most often think of the big four team sports when we think professional sport. But the activity that the athlete performs can be a team sport such as basketball, a dual sport such as tennis, an individual sport such as figure skating or skateboarding, or a sport entertainment performance even, such as the worldwide wrestling or World Wrestling Entertainment. I've included a picture of the Rivercat Stadium here. It's a picturesque ballpark there, because many students tend to forget about minor league and semi-professional sport franchises when they're thinking about opportunities. It's important with professional sports to briefly consider history from a perspective where we can consider where we've been, where we are now, and where we are headed. I'm not going to go into individually the various milestones related to inclusion or exclusion from professional sport, but it is imperative as a future sport management professional that you understand the historical and sociocultural aspects of sport. Relatively speaking, our history of being more inclusive, allowing everyone to play, in other words, has been one that's been marked by inequity and one that is still evolving. I will say at this point that I highly recommend you taking Kinesiology 323 or 324 that looks at some of those sociocultural aspects associated with sport. For the most part, race and ethnicity barriers have been overcome in professional sport. Yet women still struggle to find their place and their niche within the world of professional sports. Team sports have traditionally struggled with the notable and perhaps most high-profile exception or example, depending upon your outlook, being the Women's National Basketball Association, or the WNBA. The WNBA has been characterized as the most successful women's professional team sport. Yet critics would counter that it has been propped up through the support of its male counterpart, the NBA. Advocates for the WNBA would decry the lack of media exposure and blamed big sport media outlets such as ESPN of promoting male-only sport at the cost of female sport. In the history of women's team sports, one puzzling aspect was the lack of success of the Women's United Soccer Association, or WUSA. The league attempted to build off the success and popularity of Team USA, but not even a name brand star like Mia Hamm could keep the league from folding less than 2 years into the venture. Another league, the Women's Professional Soccer League, WPS, and you can see their logo there, formed in 2009 using a different model entirely from that of WUSA. That model was designed to grow from the grassroots up rather than with a huge national splash, which was followed by a flop like with the WUSA. It's hard to say whether that will be successful or not. I would venture to say that many of you sitting here today had no idea that we have a women's professional soccer league now. Until I did research for this class a couple of years ago, I had no idea either. So there's very little media exposure. The notion that sex sells, which is one theory related to the relative success of individual women's sports like tennis, has been captured and marketed through the Lingerie Football League, which is pictured here in the bottom right, which we've talked about before. We have come a long way in terms of inclusion for people of color, women, and other marginalized groups. But there is still room for growth, and I would venture to say that women's professional sport in particular is one area where we could forecast growth in the future. Now let's look at the unique aspects of professional sport. 4 aspects of professional sport distinguish it from other industries, and we're going to look individually at each of those. Interdependence, structure and governance, labor management relations, and the role of electronic media. So first, let's look at interdependence. The central premise that differentiates professional team sport from any other business organization is the need of the teams to compete yet cooperate simultaneously. So compete and cooperate simultaneously, I should say. In other words, the teams depend on one another to stage the games that constitute the product. When teams function together collectively, some teams sacrifice the potential for higher revenue in the interest of league stability. The key is that all members make sacrifices and concessions for the long-term benefits and growth of the league. I broke the word down here on this slide on purpose and included this picture to solidify that notion that without each other, they all fail. Although major professional sport leagues differ in the extent to which they share revenue, each league pulls its revenue to some extent. So let's now look at structure and governance. Each professional sport has its own structure and system of governance, typically referred to as the league office, which usually involves the following components: a league commissioner, a board of governors or a committee structure composed of the team owners, and a central administrative unit that negotiates contracts and agreements on behalf of the league and assumes responsibility for scheduling, licensing, and other functions, such as, for example, coordinating publicity and advertising on behalf of the teams as a whole. Now, the book goes into detail on collective bargaining, free agency, those sorts of labor management relations type elements or concepts, if you will. If you are hired in professional sport, this is something that you should educate yourself on in order to be able to talk intelligently on the subject. But it is not something that is imperative to your learning at this point in sport management. And when we look at something that we might have to cut, that's something that I've decided to cut in terms of content. So, the electronic media, network television, cable television, radio, and the internet all play a critical role in driving the popularity of professional sport and in generating additional revenue for professional sport teams. No single factor has influenced the popularity of sport, the escalation in player salaries, free agency, and the growth and increase of corporate involvement in professional sport more than television. Television has helped elevate professional sport beyond competition and athleticism into the realm of entertainment. Satellite technology and satellite television providers such as DirecTV have worked with the leagues to create packages whereby the average sport fan can access any game during the season by either paying an upfront fee for season-long access or subscribing and paying a one-time fee on a game-by-game basis. The internet is affording fans increased opportunities along those lines to see their games of interest. Currently, fans can access radio broadcasts of their favorite games, typically through league-run websites, and the internet is also increasingly allowing people to watch games online. For example, I watch approximately 60% of Phillies games through MLB.tv. Over the last 5 years, I could have watched 95% of the games. But of course, my marriage would have suffered if I had done so. But almost all the games are broadcast except for those that conflict with your local or national television broadcasts. So this is an area that will only grow in the future. This is one of the reasons why I want you to hone your technology skills and want you also to recognize that being proficient with technology, besides just the Microsoft Office suite, will help you to be more marketable in the future. Because just as X Game athletes continue to push the boundaries of what is possible, like this gentleman here, the same can be said with electronic media. So we've talked previously about revenue. Just last week we did the activity with revenue and expenses. Now I want to highlight professional sport revenue. We did that to a certain extent with the facility. I think some of you got a little bit confused in terms of mixing up the facility and professional sport. So we're going to highlight it a little bit more here. I want to highlight the unique aspects of revenue production that exist in the areas of media contracts, gate receipts, licensing and merchandising revenue, and sponsorship. As I'm sure you recognize, professional teams are under constant pressure to generate revenue. The NBA, NHL, and Major League Baseball allow their member teams to negotiate local television contracts. In the case of MLB, this policy actually leads to great disparities in the incomes of its member teams. We've talked about that before in terms of revenue sharing. The NFL, under the notion of leaguethink, does not allow local television deals except for preseason games. Finally, the NHL does not distribute national television revenue equally. Canadian teams receive a smaller portion because they lack influence on the U.S. television markets. Media revenue began to level off, or media revenue has begun to level off after a period of rapid increase, partially because of the large amount of sport programming now available. But with the proliferation of emerging media like we just talked about, this area still has an enormous potential for growth. With the importance of media revenue, professional teams have become less reliant on gate receipts, although gate receipts remain the major source of revenue for minor league professional sports. And in addition, they're the most prevalent source of revenue for newer professional leagues or mid-major leagues such as Major League Soccer and the WNBA. One trend that we have seen is graduated pricing, where teams charge less for a midweek game versus, like for example, if I'm the Los Angeles Lakers, I would charge less for a midweek game versus the Atlanta Hawks as opposed to a weekend slugfest against the Boston Celtics. Licensing revenue are generated when leagues and teams grant merchandise and apparel manufacturers the right to use their names and logos. In return for that right, The leagues and the teams receive a royalty. In other words, a percentage of the selling price for each item sold by that manufacturer. These agreements have been an increasingly lucrative source of revenue for professional teams. I've seen in my lifetime just an enormous increase in the amount of apparel that people wear on a daily basis related to their teams. And then finally, sponsorship is a highly significant source of revenue for professional teams and sport leagues, and includes signage and naming rights in addition to other perks and advertisements. With signage is a major benefit to be associated with a professional sport. And the demand for signage locations visible to the television viewer has led sport marketers to seek new and innovative display techniques, such as rotating signage. Which it could be stationary signage around the playing area, or it could be LED signage, so LED signage, which is computer-generated signage typically found on the fascia above the lower bowl and below the lower bowl of an arena. So you know that little that fascia area where you sometimes see that LED signage that's constantly changing. It can kind of be headache-inducing if you've ever attended a major professional sport event, indoors in particular. And that virtual signage during television broadcasts are devices used to increase revenue as well. Additionally, as I mentioned, teams are helping to fund their facilities by selling naming rights. In exchange for a large sum of money, a team will agree to include the name of a corporation in the name of the facility. Obviously, Staples Center. But after the collapse of Enron, we can remember Enron Field in Houston. This practice is becoming more heavily scrutinized, as teams do not want to be associated with failing or corrupt companies. So, like any business, a professional sport organization constantly attempts to upgrade its efficiency through its personnel. In searching for new employees, management often looks to sport management and administration programs, to other professional sport organizations, or to people working in the corporate sector who may have skills essential to the sport industry. Employment opportunities vary greatly in terms of titles and responsibilities, not only from sport to sport, but also from team to team within the same sport. The common categories of work responsibilities are, generally speaking, very similar to the ones we have already examined. The book talks about executive positions, which obviously are the ultimate accomplishment in professional sport, but also focuses on player personnel, medical equipment, and coaching positions. Obviously, you should focus as a sport management student on the business and personnel-oriented positions that are listed. Some of them require specialized skills, obviously, such as athletic training. I included this picture or these pictures to remind you of jobs outside the Big Four. So don't forget about mid-major organizations like the WNBA and MLS and minor league baseball, nor jobs related to individual and dual professional sport like the Association of Volleyball Professionals Tour, AVP, or the PGA Tour, professional bowlers, pro tennis. The Big Four have a tendency to dominate our thoughts, but jobs in these areas can be just as rewarding and are most often found working for a sport management or sport marketing agency, either associated with their respective tour and or the actual tour itself. Now, when we look at business positions, I want to look at the typical business positions and highlight a couple of things for you. Now, again, these are in addition to the executive and the player personnel positions that were detailed in your text. I personally believe that event and facility staff are inaccurately grouped under player personnel in the text. So, I have included those jobs here under business positions. I feel like they're more accurately labeled under business positions. Here's where you listening carefully to the lecture pays off. I will ask on the quiz, which two business position areas did I highlight as being inaccurately organized under player personnel? And obviously the answer is event and facility staff. I'm not going to rattle off each of these areas. You can read them for yourself. They're listed in your text. Most are ones we've talked about previously. I have also added human resources and financial positions under these business positions, as many professional sport teams do have numerous people working in these roles. Yet, for these positions in particular, a specialized degree or experience in accounting or HR-oriented training is imperative. So, how do you get a job in professional sports? Well, the members of the Sports Professionals Panel discuss the finer intricacies of finding employment in sport, and professional sport is probably the toughest. At the same time, I want to make sure you do not come away from that panel being scared to death about finding a job. There are opportunities for employment in professional sport, but you should recognize that there are stepping stones. Without question, an internship is an essential stepping stone to securing a position in professional sport. You should begin to construct an informational file on the teams and organizations with whom you would like to intern and or gain employment. And the individual project that is assigned for the second half of this course gets you going with that aspect. Recognize that the business area of the team is most likely where you will be working. Accordingly, you should be prepared to make a difference in that aspect of the organization. Only by understanding both the sport business side of things and the influence of sport on culture can you truly comprehend the role and scope of sport. Besides developing and maintaining that file that I just mentioned, supplement your experience while still in school. Part-time employment and volunteer experience in sales, game day management, or customer service and hospitality are valuable assets on your resume. Whenever possible, meet and interview people in your chosen field. To interview effectively for internships and permanent positions, you should have a good understanding of the industry, its leaders, and its issues. And ultimately, it's my hope that this course will help you to crystallize and gain confidence in your thinking along these lines. See you in class.